One of my favorite examples is a Head Start teacher who says she can stand in the doorway of the classroom early in the year and she can tell who the Parent-Child Plus children are because they're teaching the other children how to use safety scissors.
This is Hourglass, the podcast for United Way of King County in Seattle. Coming up, a conversation with Sarah Walzer of ParentChild Plus, a New York-based national organization that ensures all children, regardless of race, socio-economic status, or zip code, have equal opportunities from the start. United Way of King County proudly supports ParentChild Plus and its local partner agencies that work with families, caregivers, and communities to boost early literacy and school readiness. I'm your host, Joe Burris. Thanks for tuning in. At United Way of King County, we support local families through early learning programs so that children start school on a path to success. Thanks to participation in ParentChild Plus, many children enter kindergarten fully prepared for classroom learning. ParentChild Plus began in the early 1960s as a program that forged a path for children's success in school by reaching out to them before formal schooling began. That meant engaging with children and their parents in their home environments. ParentChild Plus learning specialists who share the same language and cultural backgrounds as the families they serve work with parents and home-based childcare providers via half-hour, twice-weekly visits. Families receive books, educational toys, and guide sheets with tips on vocabulary building, social-emotional development, as well as music and art activities. Today, ParentChild Plus works with more than 140 partner agencies across 15 states in the U.S. and in 6 countries worldwide. United Way of King County supports the ParentChild Plus program in collaboration with more than 12 King County community partners. And we know firsthand that ParentChild Plus graduates have a 30% higher high school graduation rate than their peers. ParentChild Plus has been led for more than 27 years by CEO Sarah Walzer. Sarah has presented on ParentChild Plus, school readiness, and home visiting to many audiences, including the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, the National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Officials, and the National Home Visiting Summit. During a recent visit to the Seattle area, Sarah stopped by our United Way office to chat about ParentChild Plus, including how the organization is preparing parents and children for school readiness post-pandemic.
The ParentChild Plus model started out as a program that does home visits with individual families, a parent or 2 parents or a parent and a grandparent, and what we call the target child, the 2 or 3-year-old who's in the home, all around supporting families on building their child's school success, their school readiness skills, the skills they will need to navigate school, and really the skills that a parent will need to navigate school on behalf of their child. At some point in our now almost 60-year history, we really began to focus on the fact that the one-on-one model is incredibly powerful for families. But because we do 2 visits a week, there were a whole lot of families we weren't reaching through those home visits, parents who are not home to take advantage of 2 home visits a week. And that meant we were not really fully wrapping communities in school readiness supports. And what we started to do was look at, well, where are those children whose parents are working 12, 18 hours a day, often 2 jobs to support their families? And what we learned was that most of them, children in low-income communities, children in immigrant communities, were in what we call home-based childcare. So they were being cared for in somebody else's home by the provider who lived in that home. And sometimes those providers are licensed and a business, and other times it's a family member or a neighbor who's caring for that child. And so we expanded our work to embrace those caregivers who were taking care of so many of a community's 0 to 3-year-olds in their homes, and started doing home visits with those caregivers during the day while they had a group of children in their care and supporting them around providing school readiness skills and supports to the children in their care, but also getting those school readiness tools, that necessary information in the hands of the parents of the children they were taking care of, because those parents were not going to have any access to that information because they're out at work all day and nobody was offering a program for them that got that information in their hands. And so we're seeing the two programs weaving together and being a way to make sure that we are reaching families, whether there's a family member home with that child to get 2 home visits a week, or that child is with another caregiver in their community, and we can reach both the child and the parents that way and have this really powerful ripple effect in communities, because that caregiver who's participating in 2 home visits a week, all focused around supporting them in providing a school readiness rich environment, is going to keep taking care of children in their community next year and the year after and the year after that. And so the more skills and materials and supports we can give that caregiver, the broader the ripple effect we can have out into the community.
I remember when I first did a story for United Way about ParentChild Plus, I talked to one of the parents and was involved, and she said the first visit that someone gave, she lets her in, and she says, "Okay, I'm going to go make dinner," and she said, "No, this is for what kind of readiness do you do to prepare people for that when they think, no, this is the child, and it starts parent-child."
You got it. I mean, we start with, so our name is the ParentChild Home Program because you as a parent or the primary caregiver of a child are the most important person in that child's life, not only before they start school, but children spend more time in their home environment than they do in school, K through 12. More hours every year where they are in contact with their caregivers in their home as opposed to being in a classroom. And so that home environment is critical. And we talk to parents a lot about their important role as their child's first and most important teacher, as their child's academic advocate and supporter as the child moves through school, and that these visits are really more about the support, our home visiting staff are called early learning specialists. There's support that early learning specialist is providing the parent, and the parent is then going to be providing the child. So the early learning specialist will say, "I'm not your child's teacher. I'm visiting with both of you so you can be your child's teacher." And it does, the parents that we work with are very busy. They have lots on their plates. They're juggling a lot of things. And so there is sometimes this initial reaction of, somebody else is coming in to read and support my child's school readiness skills. And I'm going to finally get a chance to cook dinner or do the laundry or do something else I need to do. And the early learning specialist is going to draw that parent back in and say, no, this is you and your child who are the primary focus of this visit. And you're going to be reading, talking, playing, engaging with your child. I'm just here to support you in doing that. And you are the most important person in getting your child ready for school. And it doesn't take very long for parents to start to see that the more they're engaging in these activities with their child, they start to see their child's language blossom, that the child starts to walk around the house with books and ask to be read to. And that's really exciting for parents and really engaging. And then they just embrace all of this. And the end result after 92 wonderful visits is children who are ready to be really successful as they enter a classroom, and parents who are really geared up to be their child's advocate and supporter as the child moves through school. And that's the best thing, that we can give kids as they start out in the educational system.
I want to touch on the children pretty soon, but I want to just stay with the parents for a second. What across the board is the age groups of the parents that you're working with right now?
Oh, that's a great question. So the parents really vary in age. They just have to be the primary caregiver for a 2 or 3-year-old. And so we see very young parents. We also see, particularly in a lot of the immigrant families that we work with, that the parents are older because they've had often an incredibly arduous journey to get to this country and to get settled. And so they are having their children potentially a little bit later in life. So we actually see a pretty broad age range in the parents. And sometimes it's their first child, and sometimes it may be a third or a fourth child. Again, particularly with some of our immigrant families, they may have had a child in their home country, and then there's a big gap while they, again, made that arduous journey to come here and get settled, and now they're having a child here, and they're having that first sense of having to navigate an educational system they're not familiar with, that they didn't experience themselves, where there may be a lot of cultural differences about what the school systems here expect children to know about when they walk, or to be able to do when they walk into a classroom. And a lot of the support that our early learning specialists provide the parents they work with is, here's what that pre-K or kindergarten teacher is going to expect. Here are some things that they're going to be asking your child to do. Here's what it means when they send home notices or homework. Yes, homework, even for kindergartners and first graders. And here's how you can process and support that and navigate that. And here's, I think, really importantly, here's what your rights are. Here's what your child should be provided with when they get to school. And here are some tools for navigating that. But also what we really find is families do not lose touch with their early learning specialists. They're coming back to that person when they're trying to figure out where their child should go to kindergarten, when they, have some challenge with a first grade teacher, and they're asking their early learning specialist to come with them to their parent-teacher conference or to help them understand something that's been sent home from school. So these are lasting trust relationships that get built. And when you're working with someone twice a week for 46 weeks, that builds a really tight and important bond and connection. And I'll add one more thing, which I think is a really important part of the program, and it will provide some insight into how tight those trust relationships are and how important they are for navigating communities. So about 30% of our home visiting staff, and it's probably a little bit higher right here in King County, are parents who went through the program as parents and then are hired to work for the program. And they are powerful community-based supporters for families. They are the people who know exactly how to navigate all the services in the community. They've navigated the same school system that parents are going to be entering. And they are just really, really important supports and mentors for parents who are now going through the program. And we consider that sort of a hallmark of Parent-Child Plus, but both that we hire parents who've completed the program, that our other hires, particularly when we come into a new community, we don't yet have parents who've completed the program, are from that community. We are always aiming for a language and cultural match for all the families we visit. We do visits in 30 different languages a year, and we are always looking for staff people who speak the language of the families that we're going to be visiting, because what's most important is that parent-child interaction that occurs before the child enters the classroom, and that can happen in the family's home language, whatever language the parent is most comfortable doing that in, because a child who comes into school with strong language skills in their home language is going to learn English quickly. The children who struggle are the children who don't have real strong language skills, vocabulary, understanding of the give and take of conversation. They just haven't had that experience when they walk into a classroom.
In 2019, United Way helped assemble 7 local Parent-Child Plus providers to form the Emerging Alliance of Communities of Color. The alliance serves Black, immigrant, refugee, and Muslim families. United Way then provided the alliance with no strings attached funding to allocate and distribute as it sees fit. Coalitions such as the Emerging Alliance of Communities of Color help use Parent-Child Plus to offer culturally appropriate resources and parenting support. Parent-Child Plus says that currently 60% of the families it serves speak a home language other than English. 80% of the families it serves have annual incomes of less than $25,000. And 100% of the families it serves are facing significant obstacles to school and life success, including poverty, limited education, geographic isolation, and homelessness. But students who graduate from the Parent-Child Plus program are 50% more likely to be prepared for kindergarten than their socioeconomic peers. They enter school performing 10 months ahead of their chronological age, and they outperform statewide averages on third-grade math achievement tests. Also, Parent-Child Plus graduates scored 2 times higher on social-emotional skills testing than their peers.
One of the things that's been most interesting to me over my long time with Parent-Child Plus is we used to talk only about the early literacy as the key aspect of school readiness. And it was language and early literacy skills. And more over the past decade, the focus has been on social emotional skills. And does a child have the social emotional skills to navigate a classroom? And that means things like executive function, the ability to take turns, to get delayed gratification, to raise your hand instead of shouting out, all the kinds of things that a kindergarten teacher will say to you. As long as a child comes into my classroom with those skills, the ability to be in a classroom, to navigate a classroom, to interact with their peers, I can teach them to read and to do math and all of those things. But they need to come into the classroom with those skills. So more and more we're seeing, and we're doing ourselves with Parent-Child Plus, that the outcomes we're looking for are how are our children doing on social emotional skills. And I do think that's one of the things that has come to even more prominence as we come out of the pandemic, because we know that one of the things that we see children didn't have access to when they were isolated at home with family was that experience of being in a group setting, of interacting with their peers, of interacting with other adults besides the parent who was in the home with them. And those skills are really important for starting entry into a classroom and for feeling confidence. But I'll give you also an example on the flip side. We also know that it's really important for children to have experienced the materials and the activities that they are going to see in a classroom, and that teachers are just, again, going to expect that they know what to do with. And that starts with things like holding a book and turning the pages and talking about the pictures, even though as a 3-year-old, you're not reading the words and we don't expect you to read the words on the page, but to understand how to navigate a book. But it also expands to other things. One of my favorite examples is a Head Start teacher who says she can stand in the doorway of the classroom early in the year and she can tell who the Parent-Child Plus children are because they're teaching the other children how to use safety scissors. Now, who would ever think of that as being a key school readiness skill? But in fact, using safety scissors is something that teachers actually think that all children have experienced before they come into classroom. But even more importantly, those children who can teach their peers how to use safety scissors are feeling this sense of accomplishment, of confidence, of belonging in that classroom that is key to carrying them on that school trajectory of ongoing success, because they feel like they belong there. Like they are star students because they know how to use safety scissors. And if those are things that we can support children and families in experiencing, that's what they need to be. And that's what we mean when we talk about equal possibilities from the start.
That's interesting because, I grew up knowing how to turn a page of a book, well before I got to my two children. My daughter is 27 and my son who's 18. No, but slightly after that, I'm thinking, okay, how many of these kids have turned tablet screen?
Oh, yeah.
Or a cell phone screen and not a book? How much has the presence of social media and the internet influenced your work or affected your work?
It's a great question. And we've really struggled with that a lot. We, on the one hand, we love the idea of ebooks because they mean that children, because you can borrow them from the library onto your tablet or phone, and it gives children who live in communities that have limited access to libraries or bookstores, it gives them a lot more access to reading material. But we also know that experientially there's something very different, particularly for a very young child, for a 3-year-old, of holding a book, of interacting with the pictures and the text in that way. So it's always a balance. And I think at least the balance, the way we've managed it, is we bring in real books for the program, but we also introduce parents to ebooks, because after our 92 visits, there is not going to be someone bringing them a new book every week. And we want to make sure that they continue to have lots of access to reading material. And it's yet another skill that kids need to know when they walk into a classroom, because now so many classrooms, one of the ways that teachers do classroom management is a certain group of kids go and work on doing this on the tablet while the teacher's working with another group of kids. So yes, that experience of swiping, of tapping, of knowing how to play an educational game is all a new additional part. And then I'll add that this was another, turned out to have a silver lining, but outcome of the pandemic is in March of 2020, all of a sudden, we went from doing 100% in-person visits with families to doing 100% virtual visits with families. And we all are early learning specialists, and families all, had to start navigating from, we started with WhatsApp calls and then FaceTime. And then we raised a lot of money to get people who didn't have tablets and internet access, that access in their homes through hotspots, etc., and started doing our visits on Zoom, and really gave the family the ability to really see their early learning specialist, and the early learning specialist to really see the parent and the child at the same time in the picture. And it also started to develop some technology skills across the board for families. They were, emailing or texting the tip sheets that go along with each of the books or toys that we bring into the home. We were giving families lots more access to ebooks everywhere we could, because they weren't leaving the home to go to the library. And how do we get more and more books? And they also really needed more things to do at home. So we started doing, sites did Zoom yoga classes with families, and they did Zoom story times, and all of that continued to build, both parents and children's tech skills in ways that we really need to be conscious of as we move forward. Because again, not everybody comes into the program with that access. And there is this misconception, I think, in the world that now everybody has a smartphone. And so everybody has internet access all the time. And a lot of the families that we work with may have a smartphone, but they don't always have a data plan, and they may only have internet access when there's someplace where there's Wi-Fi. So how do we use texting to reach them? How do we use WhatsApp, which is often, particularly for families with international roots, that's often the communication that they're using. We had a lot we needed to learn, and then a lot to sort of support families in figuring out. And that's, I don't think that's going to leave us. We are continuing to do some of our visits virtually when it works best for families. And we're finding both that it enables us to reach families we would otherwise never be able to reach, because it gives you a lot more flexibility about time of day for visits. It also enables us to reach families who may not have a living environment that they are comfortable having somebody come into. They're willing to do virtual visits. That's amazing. And we have families who've done all 92 of their visits virtually and have built incredibly strong relationships with their early learning specialists, and have children who are now really ready for school, which is great.
You touched on COVID, and I know a lot of people have been talking about just how much that affected young people's and students, children, entering school at the time, in school at the time. You think about where Parent-Child Plus was pre-COVID and where it is right now. How close is it to being where it was in terms of what you're seeing from young people? What administrators tell you about the kids now that they're back in school? What parents tell you?
Couple of things. I think we're now starting to see enrolling in the program children who now have lived most of their life kind of outside of the pandemic, as opposed to, for a couple of years, we were seeing children whose entire 2 years of life had really been during the pandemic. And we were seeing not only what that meant for them developmentally, just in terms of not having seen so much less of the world. They're, not even having been to a playground or, their neighborhood or a store or lots of the things that we see in children's books that we expect children to have experienced, but also not having interacted with any other adults. Really, that early learning specialist being like the first stranger they'd ever seen because they were seeing only their parents or, and family members. But the other piece is the trauma that that parents went through, both, the loss of income and the struggles around accessing food and some of the struggles that predated the pandemic and continued into it around immigration status and fear in this country. And that meant people were really limiting their interaction with the outside world even before the pandemic had begun. And that only got, their worlds got smaller and smaller and smaller. So we're seeing now children who haven't experienced that trauma because they really have been born since vaccines were available, since things loosened up a little bit, but parents who still are coming out of that trauma, and really that affects how they parent. It affects their confidence in navigating the outside world. I think parents who really struggled with remote schooling for older children and are still seeing those effects on older children who may be behind and needing support on how to catch the older children up. So it feels like it's going to be more years before we're really beyond that. And the other thing that happened, I think, for lots of programs, but certainly for Parent-Child Plus was the pandemic really highlighted some of the needs of the communities we worked in, some of the real limitations around access to, we're still seeing it today, food and diapers, and childcare of a quality and accessibility that worked for families. And so that piece, both, I think we have a better understanding of, and things that became part of the program's work during the pandemic are not going away. And so, we're now really focused on what work are we continuing to do to make sure that families have access to healthy food. We're still hearing from families about challenges accessing diapers, both availability and affordability. And so I think there's been a whole, expansion of awareness around the role that programs like Parent-Child Plus need to play in connecting families to those resources. We can't, and we know there are other people out there doing amazing work, so we don't have to be the provider of every piece of those resources. But that connector role just got bigger and bigger, and it's not something that we see shrinking, I think, in a way that people thought, oh, after the pandemic, everything goes back to the way it was before. Well, things weren't so good before, and now we're a lot more aware of that, and we really need to think about the role the program can play in making sure that families have access to resources that they need to not only support that 2 and 3-year-old, but to support their own life and work trajectory, to support other children in the family. That's all critical to making sure that every child has access to opportunities to succeed in school and in life.
And then lastly, what is next? What's new for Parent-Child Plus?
Well, I hope continued growth. I think, we hope that the lessons we learned during the pandemic about the importance of support for parents when their children are really young, and the importance of support for families is not something that's going away. About the importance of the support for quality childcare. So we really do see, we are seeing our work with home-based childcare providers, both licensed family childcare and family friend and neighbor caregivers, growing. There's a real understanding now that is such a critical childcare support for 0 to 3-year-olds, and that really, if we're going to enable parents to go to work or go back to work, that support really needs to be available. I think one of the key realizations is that most people don't work 9 to 5. They work all different hours, and we have not built a childcare system in this country that supports people who work on weekends and overnight and early in the morning, and that's how home-based childcare sort of created itself. It was responding to a need, and now we need to respond to the need to make sure that childcare is supported and is providing quality care and is getting children ready for school, because in the end, that's going to be critical for children having a successful pathway. The other piece for us, which really expands on that same need, is, as I mentioned, we always have valued and really placed a priority on hiring parents who have come through our program as our early learning specialists, but we can't hire all of them. It would be wonderful if we had enough funding to grow the program enough to hire every parent who wanted to work for it. But what we have found is that a lot of those parents who've gotten 92 visits all around school readiness and healthy child development would love to become home-based childcare providers in their community and be providing care for other parents and start a small business that will contribute to the economic well-being of their community. So we see a real role. We know who those parents are. We've found them. They've been through our program, to start supporting them on that career trajectory. So we have now begun to ask parents, while they're in the one-on-one model, is this something you're interested in? And then help them navigate what they would need to do to get licensed in their community, and then provide them with our home-based childcare visits once they start caring for other children. So I think thinking of Parent-Child Plus is even a bigger way of wrapping around communities and ensuring that there are supports for children and families is something we're really excited about in the future.
Awesome. Sarah Walzer, Parent-Child Plus, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
United Way of King County partners with local organizations to help keep our neighbors housed through rental assistance. Those partners include Centro Cultural Mexicano, a Redmond-based organization whose focus is empowering communities. All of Centro Cultural Mexicano services are provided in Spanish and English. They include basic needs such as rental assistance and access to resources to ensure that communities are stable, housed, and healthy. For more information, contact Centro Cultural Mexicano.org. And be sure to join us for Volunteer and Learn advocating for student basic needs at Shoreline Community College on March 23rd from 10 a.m. to noon. United Way staff will lead a session on our post-secondary education and systems change initiatives. For more information, log on to uwkc.org/events. At United Way of King County, we are working side by side with communities to build an equitable future for everyone. Hourglass United Way is a podcast that highlights how we and our partners spend time making a difference in our communities. Our work is made possible by the generous donations from people like you. Please send comments and suggestions about our podcast to hourglassunitedway@gmail.com. To learn more about our work or to support United Way, log on to uwkc.org. I'm your host, Joe Burris. Thanks for listening. Until next time.